I get sure. Okay, so well, I'm logged in as the presenter on one laptop, and I'm following along so I can chat on the other one.
Nice. Yeah, Nathan Hand won. That's good.
Well, yeah, we'll see if it works. I was getting an interesting echo for a second.
Oh, really? I'm going to make sure my speakers are off here. There we go. Well, thanks to everyone who's joined the room early. We're going to get started here in just about 1 or 2 minutes. Well, Nathan, I've got 1 o'clock. Do you want to get started?
That's great.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast, and good morning if you're on the West Coast. Thanks for joining us for today's Bloomerang webinar entitled Scary Good Social Fundraising, and Happy Halloween as well. My name is Stephen Shattuck, and I'm the VP of Marketing here at Bloomerang, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. And joining me today, very excited to have him here, is Nathan Hand. Hey there, Nathan.
Good morning and afternoon.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking an hour to join us today. For those of you who don't know Nathan, he's a fundraising pro, he's a blogger, he's a speaker, and he's just an all-around great guy. He's someone I admire a lot, especially here in the Indiana nonprofit community that we've got going on here. And if you're not familiar with Nathan, he works with organizations large and small on a variety of nonprofit management, fundraising, and development initiatives. He's worked on capital campaign planning, social media management, as well as fundraising and development, including annual funds, donor relations, and marketing. He just does it all, it seems like. And Nathan currently serves as Director of Advancement at the Oaks Academy. That's a great school here in Indiana. And he's also the incoming president of AFP Indiana. So Nathan, just thanks again for being here. I'm really excited to have you share your knowledge with all the folks on today's webinar.
No problem at all. I'm happy to be here.
So what's going to happen today is Nathan's going to jump right in. He's got a great presentation planned. I had a chance to peek at some of his slides here, and he's going to share some great anecdotes, some best practices, and some good case studies as well. And during his presentation, feel free to use the chat box right there on your webinar screen. Send any questions or comments. He'll see those, I'll see those, and as soon as he's done, we'll jump right into an interactive question and answer session. So Nathan's here as a resource for you for the next hour, so ask anything that's on your mind relating to social media and fundraising. So I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to let Nathan take it away right now.
Great. Well, Stephen, I appreciate being here. And since I can't see everybody, I'm going ahead and ask you to be seated. I hold your applause. I feel like introductions are inversely proportional to what you've actually accomplished.
Maybe.
Meaning they just say, ladies and gentlemen, the Pope or the President. But no, I appreciate the intro. Happy to be here, and I love this stuff. I've failed at it and succeeded at it, and happy to share some of those lessons. So we'll go ahead and dive in. For those of you that just are logging in now, we're just getting started. So welcome, and we're going to move pretty quick. If you do want to throw a question in the chat box, if it's quick, we'll try to address it. Otherwise, we'll hold most of those to the end. But here we go. So here's the scariest part about social media fundraising, is the fact that there are, I'm sure this number is already outdated, but 250 million tweets a day, right? So, Stephen, can you post the phone number?
Definitely.
So 250 million tweets a day. It's not the cute little bird anymore that Twitter's supposed to be. It's this ginormous, scary thing that I think a lot of people try. They don't understand necessarily how to navigate it, and so they quickly don't see value and they give up. When in fact there is tremendous value. So we're going to show a little bit of that stuff today. So here's our plan of attack. We're going to talk quickly about why social media changes things for those of you that are still trying to understand this, or you're getting some ammunition for your boss to share why you need to spend a little time on it. We'll help you out there. We'll talk about kind of the levels of engagement that most nonprofits experience and how to move through those really quick. Then we'll dive into fundraising, literally actually raising money online with social media's help. And then what the rules are, we'll run through 7 sample campaigns. And then at the end, if you behave yourself, we do have, in most places, and just about everybody will tell you there's no silver bullet. And this isn't a silver bullet, but there are ways to raise incredible amounts of funds without much of a social media presence. And so we'll talk about what that looks like. So I can't hear you, but I know from kind of looking through the list of those that signed up, we've got all sorts of levels of folks. There's several universities, several ginormous organizations, and a bunch of you that have kind of medium-sized budgets. They're smaller, that are flying solo, and so we're gonna run through all of these, but understand maybe in the Q&A we can address if you have a particular question that relates to your size or type of organization that might differ a little bit. We'll try to address that, but we're going to keep things not necessarily generic, but hopefully applicable to all. So why this stuff is so important in changing things, I think that this is the best kind of analogy that I've come across. So if you're a company and you used to advertise, you would buy zip code. Essentially, you'd buy lists of folks that you want to mail to, or in this case, you'd buy or rent a billboard somewhere around people that you're trying to reach live or work, or between where they live and work, right? So you look at the codes, and in Chipotle's sample, they're looking for people that can spend $7 or $8 a piece on lunch or dinner. So looking for folks with that disposable income. Here's where they are based on zip code and income levels. Throw up a billboard, but they never really knew if it worked, right? They had maybe a 1-800 number or some sort of action. They never really knew. You have marketers all over the country that are guessing and trying to understand how to influence decision-making, all those sorts of things, but never really having any ideas because they can't track what was going on. They didn't know who the customers were. So earlier this summer, I'm in line at Qdoba. There's a Qdoba close to the Circle downtown Indianapolis. I don't tweet a lot about food. I eat a lot, but I don't tweet a ton about it. But I shot a tweet on Twitter that said, "Boy, I'm hungry. Long line at Qdoba today. Good thing they're amazing tacos," or something to that effect. And lo and behold, about 3 seconds later, I get a message on Twitter from Qdoba. "Sorry for the wait. What's your card number? And lunch is on us today." So that to me was incredible. Those are free tacos, and that's not the coolest part of it. What really just happened was a giant national brand interacted with a consumer one-on-one instead of throwing up a billboard and hoping that makes sense. So that's what we're talking about. The megaphone is changing. Another great example, I hope some of you recognize this image. Long story short, a couple years ago, we know as a society that airlines don't care if they lose your luggage. Why? It takes 16 weeks and 400 pages of some sort of documentation about what your bag looks like in order to try to get it back, and you never hear anything, and you just write it off and you go get a new toothbrush, but you're furious at the airline. Well, they didn't care. They didn't care because they figured they were going to acquire more customers that day through their giant marketing budgets than you were going to destroy telling your family how much you hated this airline. So it was a calculated risk. They didn't care, and they moved on. Well, that changed, right? So this guy, and maybe it hasn't changed as much as it should, but essentially they broke the wrong guy's guitar. This guy flew on United Airlines. They broke his guitar. They didn't respond to his issue. Being a guitar singer and player and songwriter, he writes a song called United Breaks Guitars, and 14 bazillion hits later on YouTube, they are begging him to take it down. They're offering him trips around the world, free guitars, everything they could think of, because what happened? Well, his creativity trumped their giant bazillion-dollar marketing budget. The megaphone has switched. We're in control now. And so what we're going to try to do as an organization and a nonprofit in your cause is build your own megaphone and connect and leverage other people that have big megaphones in much cheaper and often free ways as opposed to throwing up a bunch of billboards and advertising, if that makes sense. So hope that makes sense. That's the big, oh, that's scary. Happy Halloween. Into the usage really quick. So I can't see the raise of hands, but I would imagine several of you are at this first level where you've got an account or two. You may or may not remember what the password is. You once in a great while, if you're at school, maybe it's on the first day of school and then again at graduation where you post, but oftentimes you forget about it. It's not much of a focus. Therefore, you don't have much of a following, and you take this back to work attitude to where social media is not an integral part of your work, and so you're going to you're just not going to get to it. Now, I want to be clear and frank with you. Right now, the organization I'm with is at this level, and I'm okay with it. We've made the conscious that we've got to get a few other things done. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you Twitter is going to save everything and that should be your number one priority. I think it should be on your radar, and you should dive in when you're ready to commit. And you're going to understand go forward what that really takes. But if you're here, it's okay. Just make a conscious choice to be here, and don't shoot yourself in the foot if Twitter and Facebook can do more for you and you just haven't focused on it yet. Yeah, there's a Prezi link now in the chat box, and it is public on that Prezi page if you'd like to follow along that way as well. If you're at this level, you're also probably pretty excited when someone tweets about you, and that's okay. That's all right. There's some vanity involved here, right? I mean, my blog is named after me. My Twitter handle is me. Like, it's okay when you like to see yourself in public a little bit because that means the important message you're sharing is getting heard and shared again. So level 2 is more engagement. You've got a couple accounts. Maybe you've picked Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You've decided to post purposefully and thoughtfully. Maybe you've made the commitment, we're going to post twice a day to Twitter and twice a week to Facebook. There's no magic numbers, but I do think those might be close. If you tweet a couple times and you're interactive there a day, that's great. If you post a couple times and you're interactive a week on Facebook, I think that's about right or okay. There's, of course, anomalies to that rule and organizations that have full-time people tweet constantly. But if that's not you, don't get discouraged. That's okay. But you've taken a commitment to do some of this, and you're creating dialogue. You're not just blasting messages. You're having conversations. You're sharing content. Maybe it's stories about your cause. You're not just linking people to your donation page 3 times a day. You're sharing other people's stuff that is relevant to you and your cause. It's still mostly about you, but you're answering some questions, again, directing traffic, and hopefully you have a little bit more of a following. If that makes sense. Here's where we want to get, and hopefully those of you that are seriously thinking about raising funds with these tools, hopefully you're here. But you've chosen which are best for you and your audience. One of the best things we ever did as an organization with another group was to sit down in a room with a whiteboard and make two lists. One of the things we were comfortable posting about, and one that we weren't. Right? Because if you dig into the fear of a lot of your bosses and CEOs, they're uncomfortable letting anyone have the giant microphone, and they want to approve every tweet, and we know that that's just not fully productive. So if you can set a list and some guide rails and share with those folks, here's what we're going to be focused on. It's all pretty harmless, easy, fluffy, fun, however you will need to frame it. And here's the stuff that's off limits that we will not comment on, so you don't need to worry about it. That will help you so far in those internal conversations in making the commitment to this stuff. I think it's important to dedicate a full-time employee realistically as much as possible. If it's not even much as a quarter of someone's position, put it in a job description. Put it in put marketing or communications in a title. When you make that kind of commitment, then it helps justify, yes, this is part of our work. And we should be spending some time here and creating a community of supporters online. I've heard before, too, that there are different levels of websites. There's different levels of engagement. It's one thing to sit back and retweet everybody else's stuff and share what the New York Times said about X. It's another level to create your own content, to be producing videos or blog posts or those sorts of things to where other people start sharing your stuff. That's when it gets really cool. That's when you gain a lot of clout and presence online. And sounds like the quality of Nathan's connections is spotty. I'm sorry to hear that. If there's suggestions, let me know. Lots of people typing. But I'll keep going. Hopefully it's okay. What does FTE mean? Full-time employee or full-time equivalent. So at this level, hopefully you may have not necessarily a whole person, but the 0.25 is a quarter of a person. You've got somebody who kind of owns this as a real part of their job. No hashtag that I'm aware of unless you want to make one up. I'm glad it's cleared up. Thank you for the other answers to the question. All right, here we go. It's also integrated offline. So on your offline materials, you're putting your Twitter handle. You're putting a little S and a T on there. If you've got, in your email and your other pieces, you're showing the world that you are modern and active online and they can connect with you there. Maybe you're going as far as to have the Foursquare sticker at the front door so that when someone comes in, they know they can check in on Foursquare there. Foursquare is a geolocation social media for those that don't know. You also, hopefully by this point, have advocates. There's people around you, whether there's volunteers or staff members or any of your constituents that are also active online and they're sharing and they're tweeting about you, and you're gonna want to tap them here shortly. Hopefully at this point you also have a few more friends and followers and you're ready to raise some cash. Because I've got two screens open, one doing the presentation, one watching the chat, I will not be watching the hashtag for the time being, but will after. So try to throw your questions in the chat room if that helps. So depending on where you are in kind of your fundraising sophistication, let's back up and do this. So UNICEF Sweden, they put out a video on YouTube, which is very compelling. You can Google that. But this is the image they put in their version of the USA Today. Their national newspaper, they put a full-page ad that says, like us on Facebook, and we will vaccinate 0 children against polio. They're reminding everybody about slacktivism, right? The idea that, okay, I can go like the American Red Cross on Twitter, and I've done my good deed for the day, week, month, or even year. That is not actually helping near as much as someone could. So that's why we're talking about raising real money to help real causes. So when we dive into campaigns, if you think about traditional fundraising rules, those don't change. Just the media does. For those of you that may not have a strong background in either fundraising or sales, in the fundraising world, we talk about a donor pyramid. At the bottom of that pyramid, you're activating people. So that's still the same kind of concept. Using social media to reach out to the universe to start engaging folks that might be interested in your cause. As they move up that pyramid or past those lines, they're hopefully engaging more, donating more to where they're at the top of that pyramid, and they are giving you a gift of their estate, and maybe they're on your board and they're your closest friends and allies, if that makes sense. Next sample basic concept. We're talking about relationships. We're engaging people and we're making meaningful matches between what they want to support and what we do as an organization for the community. That doesn't change. We're just doing it online. You're not doing cold calls and cold tweets. You're not spamming folks. You're engaging in genuine conversation and connection to try to bring folks towards your cause. Similar to other, in some case, capital campaigns, if you're going to try to raise funds online, you may not do an outright feasibility study. For those that don't know, a feasibility study is where essentially before a giant campaign, you interview your top 30, 40, or 50 folks to see if they're ready for this and to see if your organization is well known and thought about well in the community. And you can kind of get a much better sense for the size of your campaign and whether it's going to succeed. Or same rule applies here, but only in the sense that you're not going to start a giant social media fundraising campaign if you only have 4 Twitter followers and it's yourself, your mom's friend, and your dog. Right? You have to have a base, and on social media, that means a decent number of followers and fans and engagement before you're going to really jump in and try to raise funds. It doesn't have to be astronomical, but you've got to have some interaction and regular engagement. You want to set a reachable goal, of course. This tip jar rule is the biggest one I think is most important. So the tip jar rule, when you walk into a coffee shop and order your coffee, you look down and there's a tip jar. If it's empty, 2 things are true. 1, you're not going to tip. And 2, you're probably going to think less of your coffee. The second version is where you go in and you order your coffee and the tip jar tipping, and you're a lot more excited about your coffee. It's the same coffee, but you just have a different kind of understanding and expectation. You're going to be more excited about it. Same is true on fundraising campaigns online. So all of you have seen the thermometer. I'm going to jump rope for 47 hours, and if you sponsor me per hour, that's going to go to this disability charity, and that's fantastic. And if you're the first one that visits that online page with Twitter and they're trying to raise $5,000, and you're the first one there and they haven't raised any, you're going to be a little reluctant because you don't know if it's going to meet the goal, and nobody ever wants to be first. So if you could front load that tip jar, if you ever worked at a coffee shop, you know that most of the dollars in the tip jar, oftentimes, are those of the staff. They throw a bunch of cash in there so they be first. I know we're spending some time on this, but this is a huge rule in giant public campaigns. That's why colleges, zoos, and universities, nobody goes public until they have at least 50% in the door because of the confidence factor and that psychological barrier that can be there if they're not at least at 50%. Same happens online. So you also have to have the ask ready. You know what tools you want to use. Have some influencers lined up. But watch for these things as we dive through. Sorry, I'm reading to pause a little bit and let the audio come through a little better. Sorry, folks, I'm reading the chat stream, and there's a few folks with audio issues. So hopefully this is recorded and the audio is good, but I'm happy to make it available. So we're going to dive into some actual campaigns that have done well and some that have failed. True stories, 7 of them. So worked in an organization that needed 6 digital cameras for summer camp for kids. We tweeted that a couple times, got some retweets, posted a couple times on Facebook. What happened? Yay! You can laugh and cheer, and that's fine. I can hear you. But they had success. They had donors actually call. One committed online and one called. And then as a follow-up, because we know that's hugely important, we sent them the copies of the first pictures taken with a thank you note from those kids. So why did that? That is a super simple campaign. Tiny organization, limited online presence, but it worked because it was very, very easy. It was tangible. They knew exactly what the funds were going to go for. It was a true need. And granted, that organization, they probably could have dipped into the budget to pay for that, but now they don't have to. And they can use those other funds to pay for things that are maybe a little less attractive or easier to fundraise for. That makes sense. That's kind of the low-end, very basic starter campaign, but I encourage you to give it a shot. So this is a guy on Twitter. Those of you that are tweeting, you can creep him out and tell him that Nathan is talking about him. But he's very active in the community. He does a lot. He's kind of a local radio and financial planner, kind of local celebrity. He has a good following, and what he occasionally does, sometimes on his own, and I wonder sometimes if organizations prompt him, but he tends to do a lot affiliated with the sports teams, right? Because people rally around that. So back when the tornadoes hit Oklahoma, he said, hey, for the Pacers playoff game tonight, our Indiana NBA team, I'm going to donate $1 a point for Oklahoma tornado relief. Who's with me? For a couple hours before the game, he would tweet and encourage folks to come in at $0.25 a point or 50 cents a point, or right. So he finally gets up to, probably $10, $12 a point. And if they score 100 points that night, that's a lot of money. If that makes sense. So all these people are chiming in, and he's kind of done this pretty organically. But he's done it for several organizations, and other organizations are starting to get the hint that it's possible. So I'd encourage you to kind of run this concept by. It's very, very easy. There's not a ton of strategy around it, except for finding someone with a decent bit of following that's maybe a local celebrity in your community, or that's your cause. Rally around something that other people are excited about, be it a local sports team or some other thing that you can essentially take pledges per point. And it becomes fun, because then Pete's tweeting to a dozen people who have all chimed in together, and they're at $9.50 a point. Who's going to get us to 10? Then a bigwig sees it, right? So in this case, this is now several years old, but he did a similar campaign to Pancreatic Cancer Network around Colts points, our pro team here in the city, and the owner of the Colts stepped up and did $100 a point. All right, that's a good-sized donation for those folks. And now you're also on the radar of that person, and that person is now essentially endorsed your organization publicly. Just a note, if your questions on Twitter are longer than I say, Jillian, I'll try to address it here in a little bit. So I hope that makes sense. These are some of the easy, real basic ones that if you're just getting started, these are very, very possible. Okay, another Indianapolis-based one. So we hosted the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Everybody in town was trying to get a piece of the action because all sorts of celebrities are coming. There's all sorts of visitors with decent, with good hearts and some money in their pocket. And so tons of nonprofits were trying to get interviews or on TV or all sorts of things. We decided, with this organization not to until the Thursday before. We came up with this idea that we should lead these people that are down. This is, again, was a homeless kids organization, and they had a shelter up the street. So this is going to involve a couple different tools now. This is a little more sophisticated, but not much. So we wrote a blog post asking Jimmy Fallon to come up the street to meet the kids. We did a search of celebrities that were in town. We looked them up on who had a heart for homelessness and kids. Turns out of all of them that were coming in for the Super Bowl, Jimmy Fallon was the best match, we felt like. So we wrote the blog post asking him to, he was performing or doing a show right downtown on the Circle at the theater, and the show 2 blocks away. Say hi to our kids. It's a 2-block walk. So we put a blog post up. So we used a different, additional tool in this case, and to try to give it a hook, we asked people. We said, if you retweet this message and help us get Jimmy's attention, if it all works out, we'll pick one of you to come meet him too. Right? Okay, cool. So now there's something in it for me. We sent direct messages. So for those that aren't as familiar with Twitter, a direct message, private message. So we sent that to 30 influencers, 30 people that had decent following, that had interacted with us before to some extent, and they ended up kind of recruiting 35 tweets. So did it work? Wah, wah. No, it failed miserably. Why did it fail? Well, it was a saturated weekend, but this ratio of direct message to Twitter is really important. So when something goes viral, you want to contact one and you want to get as many reactions, clicks, and retweets out of that effort as possible. Only like 1-to-1, as it was in this campaign, it's not going viral. You're reaching one person and they're getting one reaction. Right? So in a great campaign, you're recruiting one person, and you hope they recruit 5, 10, 15, or 100 people to do that. That makes sense. So that's why it's important to craft that message. In this case, we knew it was a stretch. We didn't plan it very well. We threw it up on a whiteboard in 10 minutes. And to be frank, it was not really needed. So remember how those cameras were pretty tangible for a digital art summer camp for kids? That's obvious. In this case, if I really ask myself about it, it was self-serving. Not that I'm a huge Jimmy Fallon fan, but what was it actually going to do for the kids? Right? Hopefully they're not up really late watching Jimmy Fallon. So I think some people may have thought through that. Let's move on to another campaign. So there's a company in town that was doing an internal service contest. This is where it gets a little more, it's more complicated, more tools, but it gets a lot more fun. So they wanted to do a contest internally among several groups. So a group picked this particular organization to work with. And we wanted to either collect uniforms or raise funds for uniforms. So school uniforms for homeless kids that could not afford them. So we set up this first giving page. We also we had a visual art display. We engaged some other students that put little cutouts of kids, 3,000 of them, on a giant lawn to remind folks how many kids are homeless in Indianapolis. We put collection boxes in the hallway. We created a little video. And we engaged. We also asked them to donate their email signatures. So this is a large company that's emailing several times a day. And in that email signature, if there's a tag in there about this campaign that's going on and what they're doing, they're now starting to engage their customers, their friends and family, without even trying very hard. So we set up this page. First Giving, there's a lot of different kind of third-party social fundraising sites like Fundly and First Giving and some of your CMS systems like Blackbaud and eTapestry and even Bloomerang may be doing some of this kind of stuff soon. So there's a lot of these, and one is the greatest, I would say. They all have different features that are going to work best for your campaign, but good to sort them out and take a quick look. But in this case, it was another tool. And so it looks like we didn't meet our goal, but we actually did. It was 5,000, and what I like about First Giving is you can change the goal. So if they hit the goal, they raised about $7,000 right away and blew the goal in the water. So of course, being a fundraiser, I upped the goal. So that's another tool in your tool belt. This is another type of a campaign. So this is pretty basic, and what you can see on here is that there's a guy named Bob Lakin. At this point, he was a CEO of a big company in Indianapolis, so he had a little bit of kind of clout and publicity around him. And he's saying, get Bob to 5,000 followers, and he'll donate $10,000 to the zoo. Right there, you're playing off social media. You're playing off the following of Bob and Bob's friends. And that's really easy. Bob's the only one that actually knows what you're doing is following him. So it's a real easy ask. If you're just getting started with this, you're trying to ask folks to follow you or donate their Follow Friday to you, where people essentially suggest other people to follow. But this one's easy. So if you can find a donor of yours already or someone you think wants to donate, and or they've got motivation and they want to get big on Twitter quick, this is the way to do it. So if you talk to your board, maybe some folks that have some influence, and some people, maybe even their own company keeps bugging them to get on Twitter, well, here's a great way to get on Twitter, get some exposure, build some following pretty quickly, and do it all for a good cause. I hope that makes sense. So when you're doing this right, you're engaging folks. That second bullet, we talked about it with the tip jar a little bit, but that to me is the one that's the most important. You need to make it look organic, and that's an oxymoron, but you need to prep this stuff, have private online conversations, let people know, hey, I'm doing a campaign from February 10th to the 17th about loving puppies around Valentine's Day. Here's a couple things I need you to do, and I'm asking about 30 people to commit to doing that at that point. So you get a street team and you get some buy-in in that regard, and you're creating that organic virality. You're making it look like it's a huge deal when it's online, even you've been working maybe for a couple of months on the back end to make sure it looks good. These acts have to be easy, can't be complicated. You've only got a few characters and a few seconds to get attention. You don't want folks to reach out, too far. You want to know it'll work. And if it doesn't, it's okay. I am not an expert or a guru this stuff is still brand new. It's still brand new. No one is a social media fundraising expert. We're all just so far. So let's talk briefly. I know there's some questions, and we're only at 1:35 or so. So we're going to fly through a few more things, and we will have some time for questions. I promise. A lot of people ask about these contests because most of them do come down to likes or votes in Twitter. I wanted to address them for a second in that selection is key. So these organizations or all of these contests, I do know folks that have won 3 out of the 4, but the feedback around some of them it just took a lot of work for maybe not much return. Yes, Denise, I think you can give a choice, but we can talk more about it later. So these contests, we made a conscious choice to pick the Toyota contest because here's the thing. All it really cost us to get started was a paragraph. It took me maybe 5 minutes to figure out what this organization could do with a car. And you sent that in, and then they picked finalists. And only after you were a finalist did you have to engage your network. Right? So a lot of these, especially as the company's trying to get likes and followers and hits and engagement, they're going to let everybody spam their network on their behalf. And it's not going to do much good for you and your network if you're bugging everyone who donates to you already and volunteers to also vote for you on Facebook twice a day for a year, and you're going to win a bunny rabbit. And I'm sorry you can hear the crest and sarcasm in my voice, but a lot of these can be tough, and you have to make a tough call. So only when you were a finalist did you have to engage your network, and even then they had said up front that you will not compete against organizations that are much larger than you. We're going to put finalists together in like-sized organizations, so budget size. It is going to be apples to apples, and this is going to be a fair fight. Because I'm sure a lot of folks sign up for these contests and think they're going to try to win something or cash or whatever for their organization, but they're outgunned in a heartbeat from the giant organizations with tons. So suffice it to say, dig in, make sure these things are worth your while when you sign up for them, and some of them are. And for this organization, we want a car. a $50,000 vehicle that did a wonder, a lot of good for this organization. But you got to do your homework. Social gaming. So these are might be overwhelming to some of you, but these were actually, this one was designed by a college student, and it took off. So it's free right. It's still active now. I think they ended up donating it to the World Food Program, but it's a simple vocabulary game. And as you do this, rice drops into the bucket, and it's paid for via. And it was literally designed by somebody that I'm sure is down the street from you, and you can do it too. And it, for whatever reason, it was simple, and people were doing good by playing an engaging game. Here's another one. I don't know if there's anybody on the call from the Durham area, but you may have seen this. Essentially, they're trying to help you understand what it's like to be homeless. So this is a homeless shelter, I think is a predominant program of theirs. And it's a quick game. It asks you, it's almost like a choose your own adventure. Ask what you do with the money. Are you going to drive your kid to school, or are you going to buy lunch for family? Right? And it pretty quickly helps you recognize the tough choices that people make in these situations. And then, of course, as you can imagine, you run out of cash really quickly. Now, where this, my understanding is, went wrong. Yeah, sorry. Lots of people saw it, but not a lot of people donated afterwards. So you really have to think through that process. If you do have something that's catchy and viral like this, how are you making sure you convert those visitors to donors? All right, so we're going to rock through this. Yeah, let's try to do this in about 10 minutes if you can. So this is the bonus part. This is where you cheat. This is where you raise tons of money without having much of a following. In this case, so you don't have to read all that, and I apologize if anyone's offended, but essentially a comedy blogger threatened another comedy blogger for stealing his stuff, demanded $20,000 in damages. And so this guy says, mailing this guy, I'm going to send a picture of his mom, and I'm going to, okay, you got to remember, you don't mess with comedians. And I'm going to try to raise the money and send it to these great organizations instead. Again, I apologize if you're offended by the picture, but look what he raised. $220,000 because people found this entertaining, humorous, and they jumped on it. And granted, this comedy blogger probably had a decent following. Tons and tons of people chimed in. Okay, those organizations, National Wildlife Federation and what was it, Red Cross, I think, probably, I doubt they had anything to do with it. Maybe they had a relationship with this guy, but the more you can engage folks that have these networks, the more they're going to think of you when something like this happens that they want to do. Let's go to another one that's a little less offensive. So this one was in the UK. There's a little girl, I think Martha Payne, I believe is her name. She started posting pictures of her lunch. Started a blog called Never Seconds, with the idea that she was never ever going to go back for seconds at lunch. So somebody got a hold of this, thought it was cute. It starts going viral. People start, she's cute, entertaining, and fun. Don't ask me why at her age she has a Twitter account and a blog now, but it worked. A few big food bloggers and celebrity chefs get involved. She decides she wants to raise funds and take advantage of to help kids that need food. So she said, and blows it out of the water. 1,600% of goal, right? For what is, I would imagine, Mary's Meals, a small food charity in her area. But look on 113,000 pounds. I don't know what the equivalent is, but that's a lot. I don't know if Mary's Meals had anything to do with it, but they may have seen it, or someone that's close to Mary's Meals may have suggested it. But these are all over the place. Okay, here's I think the last one that we'll share. I'm not sure if any of you recognize this person. Her name's Klein. This image may have, I'm going to play the video, but if you haven't seen this, this is a woman who essentially is a volunteer bus monitor, and this video is of her being picked on the bus. Kids are like all sorts of stuff. It is horrible. It just, you watch it, you want to cry. It's just really unfortunate what happened. And so someone turned that into a campaign. They said, let's give Karen a vacation. She deserves it, because millions of people are seeing this stuff. So someone jumped on it, saw an avenue to do some good, and they raised over $700,000 instead of the $5,000 goal. Okay, what's even better, in this case, my understanding is Karen did take a vacation. She, I think, paid for two of her grandkids, college fund at, I think, 10 or 20 grand a piece, and she donated way over $500,000 to an anti-bullying charity. How cool is that? What's even cooler, I don't think you know who this guy is. He's a complete stranger that set the fund up for Karen. Right? Come on, if your heart's not happy about this, it should be. But this is really cool stuff. It's happening all the time. And here's how it works. You've got to be ready for it. You've got to watch for those things. Make sure that the people connected to you are watching for those. And at the right time, appropriately leverage them to benefit your cause. If that makes sense. You don't have to necessarily have a social media following. You've got to be opportunistic and see that intense human emotion and turn it into action. So we're going to, if that's all right, Stephen?
Yeah, that's great.
146. And I assume we're going to not argue over the microphone, but maybe take them over the chat.
Yeah, we'll just take them over the chat. Definitely a lot of questions were sent in, especially on the second half. I think those 7 case studies really spurred some discussion there. So why don't we jump right in? I know you saw Jillian's question. It was a little long, so I'll just read the whole thing. She's wondering, do you have suggestions on cultivating followers on Twitter? I know we don't struggle with what to post, but she feels her reach is too small because they don't have a lot of followers right now. And she's wondering maybe how she could boost her follower count there. So Nathan, maybe you could start off by giving folks some tips of getting those first followers, or maybe increasing what they already have.
Sure. So a couple of things. I would be tweeting right now and follow and engage with everybody who's following this this conversation. I do think Twitter chats are a great way. If you search Google for your whatever, if you're a humane society or a pet charity, Google pet hashtags. Hashtags and Twitter chats are a great way to find people who should be following you and connect with people with like-minded stuff. I also think it's hugely important to, early on, it's okay to ask for followers. It's okay to put that in your email signature and in your email marketing, say we're on Twitter, and make that the lead story. Don't just drop it at the bottom where nobody's going to see it, but announce it here on Twitter if you've been on there for a while. And encourage people to engage there. And you can also, those that do follow you, send them a direct message and ask them to donate their Follow Friday. So Follow Friday is the # or a hashtag SF, and it's on Twitter where people suggest others to follow. And if you ask everybody that follows you to donate their Follow Friday, maybe half of them do it. And you have to send these in direct messages, and don't just tweet once, expecting everybody to do it. And then keep track of who follows you the next week and ask them to do that. So block out an hour for an hour on any Thursday to shoot some direct messages out to those that you think have the highest following and most engagement with you, and ask them to donate your Follow Fridays. We did that
for one organization for about 3 months straight, and it took us from 0 to a couple thousand pretty quick.
That's great. There was a follow-up question to that. What about your current donors? How do you get those folks to follow you on Twitter? So the question isn't necessarily about Twitter in a broad sense, but letting donors know that, hey, we're on Twitter, we're posting things, you should follow us there. What tips would you have for engaging donors you already have?
I think it's helpful to share donor stories when people, there is a vanity aspect of it. So when you share a story maybe on a blog about a donor, then maybe that donor and a few other folks that do donate are going to see value in that. I think it's putting it on your materials. I would, when it's time to reprint your business cards, put your Twitter handle on your card, and everybody you see, they already have your card, but tell them this is a new one. And have that on there, and start to understand. You can just have that conversation. Add that to, those fundraisers, when they're out talking with the donors, they're coming back with 3, 4, 5 new pieces of information. Well, add that to your list of questions. Are you on Facebook and Twitter? Is that important to you? Are you engaging there? And if so, now you've found an advocate. You already know they love your stuff. Then tell them what you're doing. Ask that they keep an extra eye out for your stuff and make comments and likes and retweets. Now you're moving that advocate online.
Yeah. I actually received a direct mail piece recently from an organization I support, and it asked me 2 questions which I had never seen before, and that really make a lot of sense. It asked me if I would rather receive less direct mail and more online communications. And it asked me for my email address if so. And then the second question was, are you on Twitter? And if so, write in your username. And I thought that was really interesting, and I wrote it in, and a couple days later they followed me. So I think, what you said is completely true. You can ask your donors, hey, are you on Twitter? Do you want to communicate that way? And just let them know, hey, we're on Twitter too. Go ahead and follow us.
Right, and I would also, on most of your Twitter management tools, meaning like Hootsuite, you can create lists. And so I would create a list that's called donors. It's not public, so they can't see that, or you want to make sure it's a private list. But then you can watch. You can watch and see maybe your donors and board members and those sorts of folks that are engaging regularly, and you can retweet their stuff when it's appropriate, either personally or professionally. And so you're engaging there and supporting them, and they're going to support you back.
Great. Hey, Nathan, would you mind digging in a little bit more into Twitter chats and maybe explaining kind of how those work logistically and how people can take advantage of them?
Sure. So a Twitter chat is essentially a designated time where a bunch of people who care about the same thing get online and talk about it. So, for example, there is one called FundChat, FUNDCHAT, and that's a hashtag. So again, hashtags are a way to index Twitter. It's almost like a keyword, so you can track all that conversation. So you're jumping on FundChat. Those are Wednesdays at noon, and it's at this point, sometimes there's 100 fundraisers that are sitting there at noon on Eastern on Wednesdays, eating their lunch and talking about a particular topic. This most recent one was appeal. But in that sense, as a Twitter chat, you've got 100 people that all care about the same thing, that are all having a really good conversation. It's like going to a conference, sitting at your desk. And there are bazillions of Twitter chats out there. And I'm sure there's one about your cause or something related that you should be engaging in, right? So if you are you're an after-school education organization, there is EDU chat. Google education Twitter chat. There's tons of them. I'm sure there's one on after-school programming. So find what's related, jump in, and what that really means then, and I usually use Hootsuite to do it, but you're following that hashtag, you're chiming in, you're answering questions, you're saying hi to people, responding to folks, you're offering resources if you happen to be, an expert or have something to share on that topic.
Mm-hmm.
But then you're creating community online, and those people are gonna follow and engage with you in the future.
Yeah, it's just a nice way to meet people on Twitter who are interested in the same topics as you are. And I see you, I hear chats every once in a while. You're tweeting away to folks, and I can tell you get a lot of good engagement there.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So here's a really interesting question from Jillian. It's a really, really good question, and actually I had someone ask me that earlier this morning. And she's wondering, what do you think about bridging the age gap? So if half of our donors are older and they're not using social media, and the other half is because they're tech savvy and maybe younger. So how do you divide your strategy to include both demographics?
So in mass communications where you're kind of speaking to everybody, the social media stuff is usually an oh by the way, because if you lead your appeal and you're talking about a picture you posted on Instagram and 90% don't know what that is, you're going to lose them. So mass communication, when it really goes to everybody, it's going to be an afterthought or a PS or something like that for the most part, and that's okay. But one thing I saw an organization do that just worked like gangbusters for them is they literally hosted a social media training seminar for their donors.
Wow.
And they marketed it to the older folks that were playing to them to say, hey, we know you're not on this. You already have a relationship with it. We're happy to teach you. And if you can be the person that really educates someone on something, or you're there, you facilitate a true growth, now they can interact with their grandkids on Facebook, and they're gonna always love you and always thank you for that. And you've done a real service for them. And plus, now they're online and they'll follow you. If that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I saw a statistic recently that those sort of age paradigms or maybe assumptions are kind of shifting. I read that Facebook's largest growing demographic or fastest growing is actually age 50 to 65. So those older folks who maybe you thought weren't going to be on social media and not going to be engaging with your nonprofit that way, that may change. And conversely, teenagers aren't using Facebook at all. They're not even joining or signing up. They're going straight to Twitter or Instagram or some of these other newer platforms. So it's kind of interesting how that's sort of shifting, and I think that nonprofits really need to sort of pay attention to what's going on rather than just assume that, oh, I'll send direct mail to the older crowd and I'll focus on digital for the younger, because that may not be the case in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years down the road.
Right.
Well, good. I think we've got time for probably one more question. Angela has a pretty good one. She's wondering, how much time should you spend on this? How much time should you devote to Twitter a day? What about using Instagram? How much time should you focus on some of these other maybe fringe or smaller networks? What would you say for someone who's trying to divide up their time and focus on what matters?
Sure. So I try to limit it to, you're going to spend a little time setting things up if you don't have that set up in terms of your accounts and Hootsuite to make sure it's working efficiently. But I try to do about 10-ish in the morning. I'm scheduling tweets. I'm reading blog posts that have been posted overnight in that morning, and I'm putting content out there, and I'm scheduling it so it's going to look like I was active all day when it's not. When I'm not, I actually do my other work. And then I'm going to check in on it for just a couple minutes, especially at lunch and once in the evening, maybe, just to make sure that nothing big is going on that I should be engaging in. But you also want to be responsive, right? So if someone does mention to you, I would encourage you to have it set up to ping your phone so that you can chime back and answer the question. But otherwise, you're not hanging out on it all day. It's a very selective dive in and engage and then pull out sort of strategy. On the Instagram thing, I think it's whatever's natural for you, and I know it's probably not the answer you want. You got your phone on you, you're at an event, and you snap a good photo. Post it or pull yourself aside for just a second, or sit in a car right after for just 1 more minute and upload it and share it. That's okay. I think a lot of people that really push to social media will tell you don't have an intern do it.
because usually they interpret that as it not being a priority for the organization. I'm fine with interns doing it. If it's not going to get done otherwise, and those interns, you trust them to, you've had some initial framing conversations about what you're going to do and not do, and a little bit of strategy, and they're more savvy on it than the rest. So I really am okay with that. And they usually have a ball, and you're surprised at the number of followers they engage because it's all their friends, and they're really good at it.
Great. Well, we're just about out of time. We've got maybe 1 or 2 minutes left, and Nathan, I want to give you a chance to let folks know how they can learn more about you and maybe connect with you, hopefully through social media for sure. So where can folks learn more about what you're up to?
Sure. So if you fill your screen up, that's my Twitter handle, Nathan_Hand. There's a few of you already interacted online. I appreciate it. That is my personal email, and I do love this stuff. I'm happy to help the best I can. And then I also write a blog on some of these sorts of nonprofit issues, social media and otherwise at nonprofitnate.com. The only real thing I'll plug hard is if you really are new to the Twitter stuff, and I know that's what we focus on most today, if you Google Nonprofit Nate Twitter Bootcamp, there's about 5 posts walk you through signing up, setting it up so that this is efficient and effective for you and you don't get overwhelmed. And Polly, those top sites, Facebook, Twitter. I would add Instagram and Foursquare, I think, at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, Nathan, thanks again for joining us. This was really great content. It was really just a joy for you to lend an hour to Bloomerang and to everyone else listening. Hope you had fun. I know I did. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us again. If you liked this webinar, if you've been on other webinars of ours in the past, we've got 3 scheduled for November. We try to do them once a week. They're purely educational. So check out bloomerang.co and click on resources, and you'll find those webinars. You can register for those. Totally free. I know Nathan likes that the webinars are free. I know sometimes folks charge for those, which is a little weird, but and we will send out the recording and the Prezi link to this webinar. So look for an email from me a little later this afternoon. So with that, I'll say thanks and have a great rest of your day. Bye now.